Hey guys, welcome to this training today. My name is Jesse van Brugel. I'm a LinkedIn inbound specialist, and this is a training how to create a content strategy that generates five figures worth of leads within 45 to 60 days. This is a training for four-figure coaches, consultants, service providers, and small business owners. And at the end of this training, you know exactly who to target, what problem you solve, and how you can use the right content in order to generate those leads to you through LinkedIn. So first, we're going to start with the who, because if we think of the person we want to serve, our avatar, some people call it our ideal client, our ICP, is the person we choose to serve has the biggest amount of money we can make. And with that being said, of course, we want to be in the specifics because if we look at an example, this is happening a lot, like on the internet. People are in the service business and decide, okay, who do I want to serve? So if we just look at a really simple example between a broke post grad student with excellent grades or a high performing entrepreneur with a solid business, like it might sound obvious who you choose, and yes, I do exaggerate a little bit, but so many service providers are targeting the wrong people to start with. So what they do is they focus on people they want to help instead of the people that can help. And if we think of the way that I'm framing that, the difference between someone you want to help and someone you can help is that you want to focus all your effort on a person you're able to help. So what does it mean? It's come actually down to two things. The first thing is that it comes down to your experience, your expertise, and your skills. And secondly, it comes down to their asset. So let's unpack one by one. So of course, if you look at the person you are able to help, you first want to look at your experience, your track record, your skills, because it's no coincidence that the majority of entrepreneurs nowadays solve a problem they once struggled with themselves. For example, weight loss trainers or personal trainers first had to go through their own health and fitness journey in order to, I would say, become sufficient, experienced, and confident enough to help others. And if we look at the words of Rory Vaden, one of the biggest personal branding gurus, but also founders of the Brand Builders Group, he says, "You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were." And I think that's an excellent way of just keeping that in mind the moment you start figuring out, okay, which persons or which group of people am I actually able to help? And with picking a problem that you first overcame yourself, it has a few benefits for you. The first one is that we all feel as an imposter at times. We all can feel like we're not I would say, not good enough to serve certain people. But if we operate from a place of strength, it's really easy to silence this imposter because you're actually operating from a place of strength. Secondly, it's that it's easier to be seen as an expert on the matter because you've actually done the things that you're speaking about or helping others with. If you think back of the example that I gave about the weight loss and the fitness journey, those people are experts because they first overcame the problem they struggled with themselves. And secondly, and I think this is a really interesting one, it helps you to understand your client much better because again, you once were in their shoes. So if you struggle with figuring out this, it's a really good question to ask yourself, like, hey, where was I 2 to 3 years ago, and how can I help this person? All right. So now the second part, I spoke about assets. Some people like to call it demographics, but I'm not really a fan of that, especially not in the exploration phase because it's hard to find your ICP or find your ideal avatar in order of demographics. So that's why you want to ask yourself the question: what does my ideal client need to have in place to become the most successful working with me? And ideally, you want to look at three different aspects in terms of assets. You want to look at physical and virtual assets. You can look at mental assets, and you can look at personal assets. And as you can see, the bullet points here are examples that you can think of. So let's say you like some of the assets that people need to have in order for you to work with them. That needs to be a monthly or yearly revenue, a business revenue, an email list, or a social media audience. I think that helps you in terms of framing this, how you can best optimize that for yourself. Mental assets, like what kind of person does it need to be? Do they need to be open for collaboration? Do they need to have a growth mindset? Do you prefer them to be coachable and have really good motivation? And then lastly, you want to look at personal assets, which kind of ties in with the mental assets, but perhaps you're looking at people that do need to have a business seniority of a certain couple of years. They have to be married, yes or no, and you can perhaps look at age. As you can see, it's closely related to demographics, but I would say, especially if you're starting out, narrowing down a list like this helps you to get started and move into the right direction. Again, this is not really like the most black and white approach, but in order for you to understand your ICP in the best way possible, you want to take inventory of like their assets. And again, not all assets are important or weigh as heavily. It's up to you to decide how much you want to like care about every asset. That brings us to the next session, breaking down our ICP, and I think especially this one, moving for like moving onwards with content in a bit. This section, sorry, is super important. So if we look at the way how we can use content, so let me currently, like, I would say, like quickly like break down this visual. So if we look at the left side, like the circle with the number one and the number two, is that our ideal client, our ICP, our avatar, is they're currently in a state. They're in the current state, and they also have shared features. Because if we just think of the assets, like the more we can just align these assets, the more we can just shape this group of people. And again, where are they right now? And if you then look at number four, it's like where do they want to go? Because every person that we end up working with, they're in a painful, undesirable situation. We want to move them to a desired outcome, an ideal future. But as we can see with number three, there are a few things that are standing in between their current situation and their ideal situation. And we can list them as the fears, the obstacles, the objections, and the frustrations. I will move back to those in a second. But this is like a general like if there's only one thing you can do in terms of mapping out your content strategy, it will be this one, because this is like a blueprint. It gives you really good understanding. Like, okay, who am I actually targeting? Where do they want to go? What are all the reasons that they haven't reached that state yet? So let me continue. So if we look at the first step, like defining their now, like if we work with our ICP, we want to envision which pain and discomfort they could have at this point, like before working with you. So questions you could ask yourself is like, hey, where are they right now? Like, how does life look like? What does it look, feel, taste, smell, sound like? What problems do they face right now? What have they tried without results? What do they dislike? And again, what will inaction cost them in terms of STEM, which I like to number them: status, time, energy, and money. Like we're like, what does it again? What does inaction cost your ideal client for not working with you? Then, if we look at the second step, we want to personalize our who even more. So the second part of the equation covers the shared features of our ideal client. So we did this a little bit in section one with listing out the assets, but I would like to unpack it more here. So questions you want to ask yourself, like, hey, what do these people call themselves? Like what kind of labels put themselves? Like no one really, I would say, like refers or labels themselves as an entrepreneur, but they're a coach, a consultant, a small business owner, there are a founder, a chief marketing officer, a CEO, etc. So think of yourself in your situation, like, okay, what are the labels these people put on themselves? Because that helps you with understanding their position, but also moving forward or looking forward, locating those people on LinkedIn. Secondly, what does their business look like? Especially if you are targeting other, like if you're targeting other entrepreneurs or B2B, you want to like understand more about their business. And finally, what does their behavior look like? If you think back of the mental assets and the personal assets that I shared, you want to list out as much as possible there. Then, if we look at step three, this is the blockages, like the frustrations, the fears, the obstacles, and the objections that I listed out. And because there are many reasons why your ideal clients haven't or don't want to take action, and these things prevent them from reaching their desired outcome and staying in pain. So the better you do, your better of a job you do to address these elements prior, the more you dismantle your prospect from like raising this objection, whether it's like in a sales call, in a conversation, or just simply seeing your content, because you make it harder for them to say no to what you have to offer. So, in order to figure out what these blockages might be, there are a few questions you could ask yourself. What fears are holding my ideal client back from taking action? What objections does my ideal client have, or what are the things they tell themselves they can't take action? Which external obstacles do they blame for not taking action? And what frustration keeps them up at night regarding the problem they face? And it's a really good way of like putting yourselves in the shoes of your ideal client, but also by listening real careful and just noting down what they tell you in conversations, because it often, like, objections, frustrations, fears, and obstacles often start with, I don't know, XYZ. I can't do this because of XYZ. I'm able to do XYZ because of reason. So I would say highly recommend you to keep a Google Doc and just list as much as possible, because these are super valuable in terms of like shaping content. I will expand on this in a moment, but just think of yourself like, okay, what are the blockages that my ideal client tells themselves, or what are the things that prevents them from taking action? And then lastly, of course, we want to envision their ideal future. We want to tap into the ideal future, the desired outcome, their dream state, the thing that gets our ideal client excited. So the question we want to ask ourselves are, hey, what are the things our ideal client wants to have above anything else? And then if we think of the question earlier, like, what does life currently look like? Now we mirrored it and we're like, hey, what does life look like after they work with you? What does it look like, feel like, taste like, smell like, and sound like? The more specific, the more of like situations you can like draw out, the better it becomes for your client to picture this, to be specific there. Secondly, the part we want to speak about the problem we're solving with our brand, because sure, it's nice to know who we're targeting, like we have a good understanding of our who by now, but definitely we want to know, okay, what is the problem that we're actually solving? So I like to think of that in terms of like a brand statement. So it's often like a one liner, like, what's the problem you solve with your brand or your business? Is it something you have on top of mind? Is it something you have to think about? I highly recommend you to keep this clear, because it serves as the north star in your business. Because if you understand who you help and which problem you solve for them, content creation, lead generation, networking, engagement, etc., all becomes easy because you know which direction you're heading. So for me personally, it's I help frustrated six-figure coaches, consultants, and service providers generate inbound leads on LinkedIn through content-based selling systems. That's why this trading is here for. So is it broad? Perhaps. But is it specific enough to know for me that I'm headed into this direction instead of going into the other direction? Definitely. So it keeps me on track on days that I feel lost. So I would highly recommend you to think of it in a way of like, hey, what must solve problem do I solve for who? And as we think back of section one, we made some great effort in terms of like defining and personalizing our who. And now I challenge you to think of the must solve problem that you solve for them. Secondly, in terms of like the problem we solve, we want to think of the urgency, because in business, everything is important, but not everything is urgent. So we want to focus all our attention on people that are actually willing and able to take action, which means working with us. So because if we look at this metrics, sorry, we have different scale of willing and unwillingness and unability and ability. And what most often happens on what I've seen in like the service provider space is that people focus their efforts and energy on the wrong people. For example, they focus their marketing efforts on people that are willing but unable, and then you often get the objection or the obstacle in this case: I don't have the money to work with you. So if we think back to the example that I shared at the beginning, in terms of like, hey, do you focus on a high performing entrepreneur or a broke postgrad student? Perhaps the student is really willing, they have really high motivation, but they're just unable because they're not capable of like paying your fees and your rates. Then if we look at the people that are unwilling and unable, like the bottom left corner, they often have no clue what you even talk about. So this is a really hard game because then you find yourself convincing, like arm wrestling them on a sales call, even if you get them on a sales call. So I would recommend to not spend too much time into convincing those people. I would say your content, like the nurturing aspect of the content, would help people to get there. And then lastly, of course, we have the people that are able but unwilling. And again, then you really have to play the convincing game because their objection might be like, hey, I don't really care about this. And then as we can see, there is one segment that remains vacant. And that's where we want to focus all of our energy on. Like we want to focus on people that are able in terms of time and money, but also willing in terms of motivation. And if we think back of the assets, the more you can hone this in, the easier it becomes for you to attract clients that are literally telling you, okay, I'm ready to start working with you today or tomorrow or next week. And that makes the closing process, of course, way better, way easier. And of course, it helps you to grow your business in a much more sustainable and mindful way. That brings me to the more practical part because now we have a good understanding of, okay, who do we serve and what problem do we solve for them. But now we of course want to look at the way how we can position that through using content, because what we do here is like we build a content based selling system which allows us to generate leads through LinkedIn. So of course, content is the bloodline, is the livelihood of our system. So in order for our content to convert, we want to make sure that it resonates with our audience in a very real way. And if we think back of like the blockages that I listed out in part one, we want to like list those out because those are crucial for us to create the right content that definitely resonates and hits with our audience. So then we want to look at what I like to call the photos, which is short for fears, objections, desires, obstacles, and frustrations. So the question you want to ask yourself: what fears are my ideal client holding back from taking action? What objections do they have for not taking action? What are the things they want the most? What are the obstacles they blame for not taking action? And what are the frustrations to keep them up at night regarding the problem they face? So again, these insights in itself won't make up for complete content, but it gives you a really specific angle and perspective in your content, which you can then use to put yourself above, I would say, the competition, but also make sure that your audience and your ideal client really understands that, or that you show them that you understand them. And I think that's a really important way. So in this section, I listed out a few examples per section. So in the beginning, we have a few creators that use, in this case, they use the fear from their avatar, sorry, in order to get their attraction. So if I look at the example from Jasmine, he speaks a lot about copywriting and helping people with like content creation. And this is a legit fear that many of his audience has. Like, okay, what if no one reads this? What if no one likes this? What if we even write? Like all these things are really legit fears. So by him sharing that in his content, he shows his audience that, hey, I understand you. And B, what often the case is that it's also like, hey, I do got a solution for you. So if you look at the rest of the examples, everything is like tapping into this fear of like your ideal client, your audience. Secondly, we kind of use, of course, use objections, because if we think back of sales conversations, people always have objections why stuff wouldn't work for them or why they even should talk to you. So if we look at the example from Dina here, it's like this is probably something that a prospect of her has said to her, like, "Hey, if I follow your advice, when can I expect to see results?" And by just using this in her content, she can dismantle this argument and this objection from her audience, because the post under it is just like explaining how the process would look like and what the expectation could be. So again, then she doesn't have to explain this in a conversation. So by doing this, your content becomes a salesperson for you in order to just use the words that your prospects and your clients give to you. Thirdly, we can look, of course, at the desire. Like, how can we infuse the desire of our ideal client in terms of our content? Like, if we look at the example that Jake is giving here, it's like this is probably a desire that this prospect are giving him. Like, hey, we wish we had started on SEO sooner, because he is in touch with his audience. So for a fact, he just knows that if he speaks about this, he will attract and resonate with people that actually have this thought. So yeah, the desired based outcome, or the desired based content, is a really strong way, of course, to lure your client in. Then next we have obstacle based content. That's content that I would say people like that. That's like the things that people most often like externally like blame for not taking action. So, for example, the example here from Can is like he's speaking about a habit that's killing growth as a founder. So by doing that, he attacks people that have this habit, but he also removes that from being an issue and thus helping people get closer of working with him. And lastly, this is one of my favorites because you're really tapping into the pain that people feel. It's like frustration based content. So in this case, Jason probably knows that B2B content sucks and his audience knows that. And by just blatantly or bluntly like putting this out, he gets the attention and he can then put it into time into that. The same with the example that I'm giving here. Like I know that a part of my audience is tired of putting time and energy into LinkedIn to only get 4 likes and exactly 0 leads. And uh, they're knowing that they're an expert in their field. So let's put a suffering to that. Let's put an end to that suffering. So I hope these examples gave you, I would say, a good understanding of how we can use the frustrations, the obstacles, the desires, the objections, and the fears from our audience in order to create really good content. So let's continue to the next session. By the way, I forgot to say it in the beginning, but if you need help implementing and creating this system for you, just ping me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to look at your situation and how we can build the system for you. But I would say this training would enable you to do everything on your own, but just know that I'm available if you need help with that. So let's continue to the second session of the second section of this, and that's about building authority building content because now we have a good understanding who we're targeting, we have a good understanding what problem we solve, we have a good understanding of how we can use emotion in our content. But now I want to dive much more specific into authority building content because this is the content that positions you as the authority you are, as the name gives away. But this is also the content that will drive leads towards your inbox because you speak about really important stuff for your audience. And in a nutshell, there are two different flavors of authority building content. We got content that speaks about the doing, we got content that speaks about the knowing. So to start with the first, we have content that highlights successful projects you worked on. So you can share insights, lessons learned, and results. And these could be client results, the process breakdown. So how does working with you look like? It's a case study or it's testimonials. And on the knowing side of things, we can of course think of your thoughts on current events in the or developments in the industry, and that allows you to offer unique perspectives within your area of expertise and challenge conventional wisdom. And then the content you can look at is like sharing industry trends and insights and thought leadership content. So let's unpack them one by one. The first way, of course, is client results, because what better way to showcase your expertise and grow your authority than by sharing the results you helped your clients get? And in this case, I always think of the following statement: here are the results I achieved for X, in this case, client. And then I ask myself, how can I tell a story about this without making it extremely salesy? And this is a really good way. Like you can talk about client results, but you can also use your own results. So if we look at two examples from my profile recently, I spoke about the results my client are getting. So the left side we can see that I spoke about the story about Taufik, about how 9 days in he was generating his first leads through LinkedIn. And on the second on the right side, we can see about how Gwen took a week off from LinkedIn, which I know is important to part of my audience, but she came back to a full inbox. And I spoke a little bit more about the results there. So I know these types of posts will get people closer to working with me in terms of these offers because they're like, hey, I want to have what Tavik and Gwen has, but I also allow them to understand what the work would look like. So those are the first one, the client results. So just think of yourself like, hey, what are the results I'm having achieved for my clients, and how can I write a story about that? Secondly, you want to talk about the process breakdown. Like this is a really solid way of creating authority building content if you're selling like a coaching offer or like a service offer, because this could be super useful for your audience to understand what working with you looks like. So if we think back of like the photos, this approach, like this piece of content, can prevent many objections from being an issue. And the thing is here that with this format, you establish your authority and your credibility. Again, educating your ideal client and moving them closer towards working with you. So this kind of content definitely leads into like the educational part as well, because you're kind of you're training your ideal client, you're training your prospect in order to understand what you're about and how you can help them. So it might be wise to not overdo it, especially if lead generation is your focus. So if we can see here two examples from my own brand, is on the left side I speak about what we're actually doing right here. So I'm educating my audience on LinkedIn about how, in order to generate leads through LinkedIn, you want to speak more into emotions, literally what I discussed above. And on the right side, we can see I'm educating my audience in terms of emotion again, because I know it's such a critical and important thing that most people overlook. But once you nail that in, you are really good in like resonating and creating the powerful content for your audience. So by me doing these kind of posts, I educate my audience. I help them understand what working with me looks like, but also I give them the tools to just go on their own and just implement it. But I also know that by me sharing this stuff, they're like, hey, I might need help with this because it might sound complex, or I just want you to look over my shoulder in order for me to implement this. And a good tip here to be aware of is that you don't want to be afraid of like selling, and then secrets between quotes, or processing your content, because most of the people that you're aiming for are like your ideal client. They don't need a DIY, like a do-it-yourself service, but they want to have a implementation plan, or they want to have help with what they're doing. So if we think back, if we look at the words here of Alex Hormozy, is like give away the secrets, sell the implementation, and that's kind of what I did here. It's like, hey, I give the secrets away, like, hey, you need to push out more content like this, but I'm also like, hey, if you need a plan, I can give that to you. And I think that's something similar you want to do for your own brand. Then, thirdly, want to look at a case study. And this one is pretty similar to the first one, the client results, but it's a little bit of a different framework here. I have to give full credit here to my mentor, Sean Anthony, for compiling this framework. So, in a nutshell, like if you want to compile a case study, you want to speak about the before, the after, the time frame, the ROI your client got, the description of what was done. As you can see, a little bit of the process breakdown and results are here covered. And you want to ideally include a quote from your client. This could be a screenshot of a video. Again, two examples here from my own brand. I speak about the case studies often in like a story. So if we look at the right side, I speak about Scott, who had to make a decision. He was at this tipping point. His decision was pretty easy. He started working with me. Here's a little bit about the work we got together. I spoke about the results, and in the end, I'm like, hey, if you want to have what Scott has, send me a DM and we can talk about that. And that's how you kind of want to structure a case study. So I would say most people overcomplicate a case study in their head. But if we go back to the structure here, list by simply listing out these things for yourself, you already start to craft a really good post or a really good piece of content that you can then use in order to position you as the expert that you are, and in order to generate more leads through LinkedIn. Then number four is we want to speak about testimonials. Again, similar to the first and the third format, but with this approach, we can use the literal words or video or text from our clients. Super powerful when done right. And here are four examples. So if we look at the left side, it's a video of one of the clients from Matt, and he's just sharing a little bit of the story and the results. And of course, this gets people into the position of like, hey, I want to have what Jacob has. So I will reach out to Matt. The same here with Dina. She just posts a screenshot of the results her clients are getting through her work. And by doing that, more people, of course, want to have what Ale Vigil has, so they reach out to Dina in order to work with her. And the same applies to Stefan and Matt here. And as you can see, you can use different ways. Like some people use a video, some people use a screenshot. This is much more made, I think, with Canva, so you can be super creative here. Then, if we think of authority building content from the knowing perspective, or like the knowing side of things, we want to look at industry trends and insights. And with this format, we want to share our thoughts on current events, and by doing so, you position yourself like, hey, I know a lot about this industry. I'm well versed. I spend a lot of time researching things, so trust me because I'm an expert. I think that's kind of the angle you want to take there. So this kind of content really helps with gaining credibility and authority and positioning you as the expert you are in your industry. So if you look at the left side, the example from Jake, he speaks about the old way of content marketing and the new way of content marketing. And of course, by doing this, he shows his audience that he understands where the industry as a whole is going. And of course, it ties in with what he is doing in terms of like content creation. Second one is from Niall, and he's all about like newsletter growth. So now he's like kind of like name dropping that big brands all have a newsletter. So by doing that, he of course really emphasizes the importance of having a newsletter, and by doing so, he shows his audience that he understands the industry, but he also positions himself as like an authority. Like, hey, if you want to start a newsletter, I'm here. I'm ready for you. And then lastly, if we're going to look at thought leadership, it's quite similar to the last format. And again, this format helps you to position yourself as the expert you are because you want to offer a unique perspective on your area of expertise and challenge conventional wisdom. So if we look at the left side, the example from Niall, he speaks about the 9 thoughts on marketing. So by doing that, he positions himself as like a thought leader on marketing. And on the right side, we see an example of Rob, where he speaks about content pollution. And by doing so, he's even like educates his audience a little bit, but he takes a really stance of like, hey, I think this is happening in the industry, and I think we should be aware of that. So that's in a nutshell the 6 types of authority building content that we can look at. So we have client results, we have a process breakdown, we have a case study, we have a testimonial, we have the industry trends and insights, and we have, of course, the thought leadership. And then lastly, in execution, because content itself is not going to write itself. Like I can't write your content for you. But what I can do is I can give you like the content strategy here to build up your content. Sorry, I can give you the strategy to build up your content strategy to just uh, make sure that you cover all the ends. So I would say I have 2 scenarios here. So you might be in the situation currently that you don't have leads through LinkedIn yet, and in that case, I recommend you the following split. So 40% of your content should be problem solving. So this is like the educational or how-to content, and 60% should be, from my perspective, should be the authority building content, the ones that I just described. And at this point, you might ask, hey, why not do more authority building content when I don't have leads yet? And that's because I would say you're still somewhat busy building your audience, creating goodwill, and creating credibility, which is needed to establish the foundation. So you don't want to go all in into authority building content yet. So let's say you have no leads yet, but you want to post 5 times a week. You're already posting 5 times a week. I would say the following split might be useful for you. So the first day, whatever is it on Monday or Tuesday, that's up to you. I would say speak about the client result. So use the examples that I gave here in the training. The second day, you want to speak about perhaps more like a carousel or something, and again, educational. So what is something you can just explain or educate your audience? And again, that type of post generally doesn't generate leads because it's just educating your audience and growing your audience. But in order to build this trust and credibility, do need to have it in our overall content strategy. I would say in day 3, you can speak about a thought leadership post. Day 4, you can speak about the industry trends and insights. And the last one, the day 5, sorry, is again, it's a listicle post or an old versus new, where you kind of like compare the 2 situations. And again, that's like a more educational, a more how-to piece of content, which helps with so the like the audience building part there. Then lastly, we can speak about the situation where you have some inbound leads already, um, but you're unable to make this a consistent stream. Then I would say I will recommend the following split. So 20% problem solving content and then 80% authority building content, because there is traction. So we want to kind of want to double down on that. That's the philosophy here. So again, in case of posting it 5 times a week, you want to do something similar, but then the last day you swap out what I here did an educational post. Here you can swap out and you can speak about the testimonial of a happy client. So that brings me to the summary because we have spoken about a lot. We have spoken about the right person to focus your efforts on. Because if we think back of the beginning of the training, it's the person you choose to serve has the biggest impact of the amount of money you can make. Secondly, we want to personalize our who in order to fully understand them. Because again, if we better understand them, we can create better content. We make sure that we really tap into their emotions and their feelings, and we can make sure that they understand that we understand them. Thirdly, we want to define our brand statement and have the specific urgency clear, just for us to have a north star, a direction, like which must solve problem do you solve for who. Then number four is we want to use the right emotional angles to supercharge our content, because the more we can tap into these emotions, the more we can move our audience and our prospects to taking action. Number five, we want to leverage the insane power of authority building content. Like one of the biggest mistakes I see service providers make on LinkedIn is that they only create educational content. So they only speak about how to do XYZ. They only do carousels, or they only have like the list of articles. But that's not the content that generally brings in the leads. It's the content that positions you as the expert you are, like the authority building content. So we have the knowing and the howing. Again, section two here with the six types is really interesting for you to then check out. Leverage that part because that's what gets you the leads. Number six, we want to compile everything in a complete content strategy. And then again, this is like the split I recommend, but it's up to you to adjust it for your own situation. And that's number seven. That's the blueprint in order to generate high quality leads through LinkedIn. So again, what I said in the beginning, implement this system on your own, and you can expect, I would say, within 45 to 60 days, you can expect leads coming into your inbox. If you need help implementing this system, I'm happy to help you out. Just make sure to ping me on LinkedIn, send me a message, tell me you came through this training and that you need help with implementing it. And then, of course, we can look at your specific situation and we can make the right implementations in order for you to bold on LinkedIn as a new marketing channel and thus grow your service business. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next one.